everyone, it's Jillian here. Welcome back to another episode of Winning Insights. On this episode, we have Horse&Rider OnDemand expert Cody Crow talking about how he introduces a 2-year-old horse to a saddle and a saddle pad for the very first time. So he talks us through each step, and he gives some really good tips for when you're doing this at home. And if you want to see the video version of this audio training session, subscribe to Horse&Rider OnDemand, where you'll get training videos from experts like Cody, Bud Lyon, Brad Barkmeyer, Robin Frid, and so many more. Check the show notes for the link to sign up. Now let's jump into this episode with Cody Crow.
Now we're ready to start saddling her for the first time. So what I'll do is I'll maybe just lead her over there and let her look at this blanket. Sometimes that alone is alarming to some of these colts, and then you kind of need to desensitize them to that. So I'm just going to kind of take her over here and see if she wants to look at it. And if she does want to kind of sniff around out on her own or kind of play with it, I'm going to let her. You know, she's curious about it, so I'm going to let her just kind of express that. She doesn't seem overly worried about it, obviously. So now that I know that she's not terrified of this, I'll hold her and my lead rope in one hand, and I try to hold the rope kind of flat on itself like this. So I try really hard to not ever wrap one around like that and put my hand in here, because if she spooks or we get tangled up, she's going to pull this tight on my hand, and now I'm going to be stuck to this colt. And when she leaves and goes away from me, it's going to jerk me up under her feet. So I will just kind of fold it flat on itself like this, so if she does get away from me or if she pulls, at least she's not going to trap my arm and put me in a pretty bad spot. So I'll just let her kind of smell around on it. If she seems fine with there, I'm going to kind of let her put it on her body. And I'll just kind of rub it on them. You know, some colts don't like that, and they're going to leave, and I'll let them. Let's say she is going to kind of leave. I'll just keep redirecting that nose over here. I'm not making the pad go away. So when she stops, I'll kind of come back over here and then kind of rub it on her. And then when she stops, then the pad gets to come away. That would be the pressure and release. So when she stops, lets me come up to her, then I'll release the pressure or take the pad away, whatever that pressure source may be. So when she gets pretty comfortable with both sides, which she seems pretty good on the left, I'm going to step over here, switch hands, and I'm going to see, will she let me kind of get to this shoulder? Will she let me rub this pad up on her body? Good. She doesn't seem to mind. So now I'm going to just see if she's going to let me set it on her. You know, so she doesn't really care here too much. So now I'm going to ask this mare to step forward. And a lot of times whenever they go to move, the pad or the saddle will move as well, and then that will kind of scare them. So I try best that I can to not let it fall off or come up underneath them, because that'll often scare them. So I'll try to keep my hand on it here. So if she did spook, I could redirect her nose towards me, which is going to make her hip step away from me. And then I can take this pad if I need to. I'm going to try not to let her head get away from me, because if she did decide to spook, she could go to her left, which is going to make that hip step towards me and put me in a bad spot. And if she decided to fire with that back leg, she could get me. But if I pull this head here, I'm making that hip go away from me, which is keeping me in a much safer spot. Good, so this doesn't seem to bother her too much. So we're just going to kind of lead her over here. Going to keep my hand on this pad just in case. And now I'm going to try to do the same exact thing with the saddle, but without this pad. So I'll hold this saddle in one hand. If she wants to check it out, she can. If she doesn't, she doesn't have to. And I'll just kind of get it up here, push it around on her body a little bit, kind of jangle it, get him used to just some of the noise and the racket that this makes. Switch sides. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just try to switch hands here. Get the saddle back here, kind of touch her a little bit. She seems pretty good with all this. So there, she kind of wanted to leave. I'm gonna let her. And then when she stands here, I'm gonna pet on her. Then this saddle gets to come away. Good. So anytime that you can take a minute and give them some positive reinforcement, kind of pet on them, scratch them, give them a reason to want to be good. You know, like they have very little reward in any of this stuff. She was not interested in being pulled out of the pasture today and saddled. So if I can give her a good scratch or make her like it, I need to give her some sort of incentive to want to be here. So make sure there's no dust or dirt on this. Take her away from the saddle, and now I'm just going to be a lot less nonchalant about it. And I'm going to just see if she's going to let me throw this on her. If she's going to let me be a little bit more assertive and not reactive, which she is. So if she's ready for that, then she's ready to saddle. So I saddle mine, of course, from the left side. So I'm going to pull this stirrup up over the horn. So I have one less thing to try to flip up over her. Some colts are pretty flighty and sensitive about it. So the last thing I want is to leave that stirrup hanging down. And then when I go to put it on her, I've got all of these cinches and all of that underneath the saddle and on top of her back. Because I'm gonna already have a hard enough time getting her to stand still without having to sort through all this stuff. So I'm gonna pull this up and over this horn. Walk back over here. If she seems good with it, I'm just going to kind of lift and I'm going to just slowly set it down on her back. At this point, I don't need to just drop this saddle on her. I mean, nobody would appreciate that on their back, and neither do they. So I'm going to lift this pad up, pull my saddle up, lift this pad, give her some room in her withers, make sure I'm fine on this side. I'm going to see if she's calm with this saddle, and if she is, then I'm going to try to switch sides. When you go to switch sides, you're running a little bit of risk that she's going to dance around and the saddle's going to fall under her, which I'm hopeful that we don't. But if the saddle did fall off and she stepped on it, which happens pretty regularly, that's why I use just kind of an old beat up saddle that I don't particularly care if it gets too trashed. So I'm going to make sure she's steady. I'm going to shorten her up here, switch hands, and then I'll immediately come back and kind of grab this saddle, because if she does decide to start bucking, I'm going to try my best to keep it on her back and pull her and redirect her into this circle. So she doesn't seem to care, so I'm going to set this stirrup down, drop this cinch, make sure I've got one that's going to kind of fit. So I want that ring kind of right in the middle or pretty close. A lot of these 2-year-olds, it's really hard to find some of the stuff that fits them perfectly. So now I've got everything adjusted here. I'm going to tuck this stirrup leather back down in there. Switch sides again. Now I'm going to throw this stirrup back up over the top so it's out of my way. Going to let down my latigo. Now here you're in a bit of a vulnerable spot. So I've got to reach down under this mare's belly, which puts me down there closer to her feet. So I need to make sure that I've got a little bit of a short hold on her, so when I get in this vulnerable spot, if she goes to move or has some big reaction, that I can redirect that head towards me, and as I said, get those back feet away from me. So I'm just going to kind of pet on her, make sure that she's fine with the sensation, make sure she'll let me catch her up under here. She seems more worried about fighting with this rope, so I don't think she's going to care. I'm going to bend down, grab this cinch, and I'm just going to kind of lay it up here under her belly, and I'm just going to let her kind of feel it. Pet on her, let her know it's fine. When she shows me that that's not that big of a deal, I'm going to go ahead, run this latigo through. And I've got a back cinch on this, I've got a double 2 cinches here. So you're going to always do the front one first, because that's the one that you can tighten up. You would never put this back cinch on first, because you can't get it tight, so you can't secure that saddle. So if we had a reaction and I only had this back cinch on, this saddle's going to slip, but it's still going to be connected to her. And if you want to see a wreck, get a saddle underneath a colt who hasn't gone through all of this stuff yet. So we try our best to prevent some of that stuff. So now that she's here, we got her saddled. She's going to move around a little bit. I'm just going to slowly tighten this girth. I'm not going to just cinch her up. You know, you got to give her time to accept that pressure and sort of understand what's happening. I've seen some guys come up on the first time and then they're like, we've got the saddle on, and then they just run over there and crank it up. Well, you want to see a rodeo, that's a pretty good way to do it. So I'm just going to slowly get her back up here. So now I've got it. There we go. She's like, what is that? Tight enough that if she leaves and if I lost control of her, which I'm going to try really hard not to happen, but it is a possibility, that I at least know that this saddle's going to stay on the top side of her. Now I'm going to reach back here and I'm going to put this back cinch on. This one I'm going to leave kind of loose. It can't be loose enough where it's hanging down there that if she went to buck in, she's going to get a back leg up in it. But I'm also, on her first saddling, not going to just crank this thing up and turn it into a bucking strap either. All right, so she's been good with it up till now, and she may be good with it for the next step. But this is the part where when you ask these horses to move and they bend their back for the first time, this is when they'll sort of feel the pressure of this cinch. And if there's going to be a rodeo, this is often when it happens. And so if it does, I'll just keep redirecting this head to the inside. So I'm going to just kind of have her turn here a little bit. So far so good. So now I'm going to change tactics and I'm just going to walk her around. She looks like she wants to be a pretty good citizen about it. So I'll just lead him around, see if she's going to let me change direction. When I change direction here, I have a short hold on the lead rope and I get real rigid with my elbow and I kind of lock it. So if she decided to buck or move, she's going to run into my elbow. One, I hope it's a deterrent for her not to come over the top of me. But two, I've got enough strength here in my arm that it's going to push my body away. And hopefully I don't get knocked up under her feet. So change direction, kind of guard block her with my arm. There we go. Now let's see if she's going to take a back step or not. This too is another trigger for some of these colts because when they back, they've got a round. And when they've got a round, they'll tighten these cinches. There we go. I'm kind of all right with that. Good. So as far as the initial saddling goes, I'm pretty satisfied with this progress. So let's see if we can put that side pull back on her and we'll show you the next step.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com to see all the cool things that we're up to. And if you have any comments or questions, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys. And if you like what you're listening to, please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.